initially your body is going to go in, these toxins are entering your body in your lungs and just getting to your bloodstream and everywhere else. Your body's trying to flush out as much as possible because the body does not want them there. They're foreign invaders. They're toxic. The immune system's attacking them. That's causing an inflammatory response. That's causing symptoms potentially. There's all this stuff. It's just making your body work a lot harder than normal to stay balanced, and the body doesn't like it. So the body tries to get it all out. But if the body cannot get it all out, it has to do something with these toxic elements because there's a threshold of what the body can handle kind of in its processing center. And if that level is exceeded, kind of that stress threshold or the cup, as is often explained in functional medicine, if that cup overflows, like their toxic cup, then your body has to do something because it'll be too stressful to keep processing these toxic elements.
Hi, it's Dr. Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. So stay tuned if you want to know more about how to detox in a safe way. So today we're going to be joined with Jeff Hoyt. So he is the owner of Zeolite Labs, and we're so happy to have him here because he is going to talk to us today about detoxing and why it is important. Well, we know why. We live in a toxic soup bowl. So welcome, Jeff. Excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jen. I think this is going to be a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, super fun. Well, for those who have not heard of you or what you do or why you care so much about detoxing, can you tell us how you got here, how you got to this place, owning this company? And did you ever think that this is what you would be doing?
Yeah, so it all came out of personal necessity. So just, I've been on my own health journey for pretty much since birth. So just traumatic birth
Right.
experience, was on antibiotics for the first few years of my life. Lots of issues, had some medical injury, we'll call it, when I was 18, autoimmunity, just a lot of issues. Tried the conventional route for a little while, didn't get the results I was looking for. Then I was introduced to functional medicine. So I started seeing functional medicine practitioners, started seeing better results. Then I went and kind of got into that industry myself, went and worked for a food sensitivity laboratory, was working with a bunch of functional docs as kind of my clients, did some functional training myself. Then I got into supplements, and I said, okay, this is an interesting industry because there's millions or thousands, hundreds of thousands of these supplements out there, and I'm just like, I don't know about all this, right? So my interest was kind of the quality and the quantity of supplements because there's so much stuff out there. And I recognized that a lot of these supplements were just marketing companies that were taking advantage of trends and, honestly, kind of taking advantage of people because there's a couple kinds of companies. You've got the companies who put people first and profits second, and the companies who put profits first and people second. And a lot of these marketing companies are focused on profits, not that they're not helping people, but it's profit driven. And then
Yeah.
there's going to be less quality products and less concern for the customer. So just was looking into different sources of ingredients and why some were so much more expensive than others. And then just from the industry perspective, you've got the marketing psychology of it all. But then from like the ingredient manufacturer, when I started my first company, I was, working with these raw material suppliers, and I said, why is this aloe vera, for example, $600 per bag? This other aloe vera is $20 per bag, right? So there really is a huge difference in quality in products. So I said, all right, we're going to take the best quality products out there, but now that's not enough because we need to get them at the proper doses. So I did a lot of research into therapeutic dosing and just getting, the desired amount, the amount needed for each individual person, which is usually not what's on the label. So did that with supplements. That was over 10 years ago. My first supplement company was focusing on immune regulation. Then I opened up kind of a biohacking wellness center with,
Mm.
cryotherapy, oxygen therapy, hydrogen, PEMF, neurofeedback, all the fun stuff, sauna. And then what I realized was this equipment and, the strategies we're using were very helpful to kind of prop people up to make them feel better. But if they stopped coming in, they were back to where they started, right? So they weren't really removing the internal sources of toxicity that were making them feel terrible. So I said, all right, we need to do something that's more of a root cause solution. And that's where I started looking into detox. And what I thought I was doing, I thought I was utilizing detox techniques at the time. I mean, I was using infrared saunas, seaweeds, chlorella, even synthetic chelators, lots of things that people are using for detox. But I realized that detox sometimes is a little bit harder than people think because we have to understand why the body is doing what it's doing. And sometimes the body wants to hold on to toxic elements. And when we understand that and why and how to encourage the body to let go, that's when we can start developing more advanced detox solutions. So that's basically how I got to Zeolite. I was searching for advanced detox solutions, and I started experimenting with Zeolite, and I realized that there was something a little bit different about this. It seemed to be very powerful. And then I took my background in quantity and quantity of supplements, and just my goal was to develop the best quality zeolite supplement on the market and then offer it at the therapeutic dose so people can get the desired effects, which we could probably talk about later with kind of the dosing paradox that I discovered. So that's where I'm at today. Zeolite Labs, just kind of a culmination of functional medicine, biohacking, personal wellness journey, and just trying to kind of meet the need in wellness, because that's my professional mission statement, is to meet the need in wellness. I think advanced or just detox solutions in the 21st century are in need right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I really like how you also broke down how a lot of these supplement companies, they are marketing companies, and they may, if they're more of a multi-level marketing or direct to consumer, they use, well, they kind of prey on stay-at-home moms, but they're using these as marketing, but they're paying out, but the cost is usually at the quality of the supplement. And I was just talking to a patient about that, about magnesium oxide and how it's a crap form of magnesium. And people say, oh, I'm taking magnesium, like, but what form? And the concern is, if you don't have someone that really cares like you do about the quality and where the actual supplement comes from, well, you're getting probably contaminants. They could be adulterated, and we see this. There was a study on Amazon supplements. And I think it's trading convenience. It's also marketing, and really sadly, as a physician, me just working in the ER, not having to get customers, not having to really do anything. Like, patients came to me, and I just got paid hourly. I was so naive to marketing and pain points and all these things. And sadly, they're like after you. And they're mostly after women, honestly, because women are the ones that do the most spending of the household. We just do. We like to shop, and we do. So a lot of these marketing ploys are towards women. And, I have patients that fall for some of it, even, or their friends told them. And I'm like, but let's actually look at the ingredients. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, and, where is it coming from? So I love that you brought that up, because we have to be very sharp in this world. I like to talk about spiritual things, and the enemy is very shrewd, But anyway, we have to be careful. So I love that you brought that up. I think it is such an important point that sometimes it's glossed over or it's not mentioned, because sometimes those influencers are part of the marketing ploy and they're getting paid to promote a product they wouldn't even use. So
Yeah.
anyway, it goes back to integrity. So love that we can talk to you about all that. So what are toxins? Because someone might be listening out there and they're like, glyphosate's a toxin, right? Or they might not even know what heavy metals are and why they're bad for us. They might have hundreds of mercury fillings in their mouth that their dentist said was safe. So can you define what toxins actually are right now that we're worrying about?
Sure. Well, I guess the technical definition of a toxin would be a biological agent that's toxic to your body, opposed to a toxicant, which is a man-made. So, like, technically, glyphosate would be a toxicant, these industrial things. But generally, when you hear toxin, everything's grouped together just for simplicity. A lot of times I'll say toxins and toxicants, but other times I'll just say toxins. So probably when we're talking and when people in the industry say toxins, they're referring to, these harmful substances that are, around you or inside of you that are causing issues that we don't want.
So toxicants is man-made.
Yes. Yeah.
So
So microplastics, the glyphosates, the pollutants, all those things are man-made toxicants. And then things like snake venom would be a toxin, or
yeah.
things that your body produces, like ammonia, could be considered like a metabolic waste toxin.
And heavy metals are considered, because they're natural, they're considered what category?
Those would actually be toxicants.
If you want to rule the Crunchy Mom Facebook group,
Right. Yeah.
actually, and they'll be like, okay, Karen. But okay. So anyway, back on track.
I'll just say toxin for everything, probably. So people know
Yeah.
what I mean. That's what everyone else says. It's like one of those things you say Kleenex, but it's really, that's a brand of tissue. but
Yeah.
everyone just says Kleenex for everything. Everyone, if people know what you're talking about, it's fine.
Yeah. I agree. So why, our bodies are just made so well to deal with toxins and toxicants. Is it just too much of a body burden, or why would we store some of these toxins in our fat cells, or why is it so hard to get rid of these?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing because if they are like you said, if they're so bad, why is the body storing them? And the body does store them. I guess that's the first thing to address. So I mean that's pretty clear that especially in fat is a built-in kind of storage mechanism for these toxic elements. So the thing to understand is the body does what it does for a reason, right? God designed the body beautifully. It's designed to survive, it's designed to thrive. And sometimes we don't understand it with our limited, you know, minds. But it does what it does for a reason. So let's say you're exposed to there's a forest fire or something right next to your house, and you're getting a lot of inhalation of toxic elements through the smoke. And initially, your body is going to go in. These toxins are entering your body in your lungs and just getting to your bloodstream and everywhere else. Your body's trying to flush out as much as possible because the body does not want them there. They're foreign invaders. They're toxic. The immune system's attacking them. That's causing an inflammatory response. That's causing symptoms potentially. There's all this stuff. It's just making your body work a lot harder than normal to stay balanced, and the body doesn't like it. So the body tries to get it all out. But if the body cannot get it all out, it has to do something with these toxic elements because there's a threshold of what the body can handle, kind of in its processing center. And if that level is exceeded, kind of that stress threshold or the cup, as is often explained in functional medicine, if that cup overflows, like their toxic cup, then your body has to do something because it'll be too stressful to keep processing these toxic elements. So then the body says, all right, let's tuck this, mercury or arsenic or whatever it may be into a fat tissue and we'll deal with it later. Because when the body tucks these toxic elements into fat, it's protective short term because it's hiding the toxic element from the immune system and from the defense or cleanup crews of the body, although it's not great long term. So if you're constantly exposed to something and your body can't keep up, you might be symptomatic because you're basically having detox reactions every single day because your body can't keep up with the daily dose of toxins. But then the body's going to start storing and storing and storing. So the longer that you've been in a situation where your body can't keep up with the daily dose of toxicity, the more accumulated toxins that you're going to have. Now, the issue is generally the body just keeps those toxic elements in tissue pretty much indefinitely, unless there's a situation where the stress load is reduced so much that the body has extra energy to release or mobilize those toxicants from tissue for excretion. But a lot of times we just don't get there because we're always under some level of stress. And it's not just the physical toxins and toxicants that we're dealing with. It's kind of there's a stress threshold. It includes emotional stressors. It includes physical stressors, these toxicants, all sorts of things. Anything that makes your body work harder than normal to stay balanced is what I call a stressor. So even if you're going through a divorce or some sort of situation where there's a lot of emotional energy being used, that's pulling from your body's total energy, and that takes away from your body's detox energy, right? So just that alone can result in an accumulation of heavy metals and toxic elements. So for example, when someone has chronic Lyme disease or some sort of chronic condition, they generally always have stored heavy metals, microplastics, and toxic elements, even if they weren't exposed to more of those things than the average person. And it's because they had less processing power to deal with those toxic elements when they were coming in. So instead of naturally clearing them all like a healthier person, the body was tucking them into storage because the body was using a lot of that energy to deal with, the emotional stress or like in chronic Lyme, the infections and all the issues with that. So it's kind of when you have a chronic illness, you end up with toxicity. It's not necessarily that the toxicity was the root cause, but it could be the end result. And then now it's contributing to the chronic illness. So it's kind of a negative snowball effect.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you put that. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you've noticed this, but with the GLP-1s and people losing massive amount of fat and weight, but they weren't set up properly with detox, with making sure their gallbladder and liver were functioning to be able to get rid of that. I mean, rapid weight loss is not it's not good. It's not healthy. And there was like a preschool teacher at my son's school, lost lots of weight from a GLP-1, but then had to get her gallbladder out suddenly. And it's like, well, that makes sense because they didn't address the root cause of the weight gain, which was probably toxic overload. And this preschool was full of mold. So then lost all this weight and the body's dumping all these toxins everywhere and the gallbladder like explodes kind of, so our body is just, yeah, perfectly designed, but we live in such a toxic world. And with that fat, fat is protecting your body from this toxic burden. And I see this a lot with mold patients, and they, rapid weight gain, and they can't lose it, and they're not eating anything because their body is still being exposed to the mold. They can't detox it properly. They're packing on the fat cells, and then, more water weight comes. So it's just this vicious cycle. And that's why we have to pay attention just as weight gain and increased fat cells as a sign that maybe toxic burden is a problem, whether it's a kid, whether it's, yourself, you have to recognize that. Yes, sometimes it's a thyroid problem and a hormone problem, but a lot of the times it's toxins, or toxins is making that problem
Yeah.
worse. So if we're not paying attention to toxins, I mean, it's probably a problem, honestly, if you're not paying attention at all.
Yeah.
Um, so let's go into like zeolites, and how can this help remove toxins from the body? Because I mean, before zeolites, IV chelation was a thing, which, I mean, that's a little bit hard on the body. So when zeolites kind of, when did they even like really come about? I mean, since I mean, for like 10 years, I feel like I've been hearing about zeolites, but how are zeolites discovered, and like, what is it exactly? I wanted to talk to y'all about Zeocharge, a supercharged zeolite powder. It's a smart binder to help calm the storm in your body by reducing toxicity in an overworked, overwhelmed system. Zeolite is a naturally occurring mineral with a negative charge and cage like structure that traps positively charged toxic elements in its cage. It can help detox heavy metals like mercury, lead, and cadmium, as well as mycotoxins, metabolic waste products, and more. So please check it out.
Yeah, so zeolite is a mineral. It's a naturally occurring mineral with a negative charge. So it binds to the positively charged elements, like the toxic elements in your body. So it's been around forever, but it was initially used for, non-human applications. So it was used for water filtration for a long time. So there's a lot of research on, direct binding capacity of zeolites to specific, glyphosate and things in the water. It was even used in nuclear disasters like Chernobyl to clean up radioactive materials from the water supplies very
Oh,
effectively.
I never
So
knew
it,
that. That's
yeah,
cool.
so it's cesium and strontium. So it very effectively removed those. So it's been used for industrial purposes for a long time and for water filtration. And then it was started to be used for animals. So it was used for, in animal feed to bind to mycotoxins like ochratoxins, aflatoxins, and ammonia and other things. So it was used for animals, and then it progressed to being used for humans. But that research was much later. So it's really only been available as a supplement for about 25 years, which is relatively new because a lot of the other binders, it's a binder is what it is. So it's kind of in the class of activated charcoal, bentonite clay, some of these other binders. It's just that it's kind of considered a smart binder or a next generation binder because it's not indiscriminately binding everything. So it's not binding the good with the bad. It's selectively binding the toxic elements, which we can talk about the mechanism as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, essentially,
I
go
think
ahead.
that's a good point, Jeff. Like, I want to just pause for a second
Yeah.
because, oh my goodness, it drives me crazy. Have you ever seen like a video or a reel of someone drinking a charcoal drink, like a charcoal lemonade, and then eating a salad with it? So, can you talk about why that's a problem? Like you were saying, selective versus non selective binders.
Yeah. And then I can tie in the chelation aspect as well. So all of these are in a category of binding agents. So you've got natural binding agents, which generally we call binders. And then we've got synthetic binding agents, which we call chelators, right? So like synthetic, it could be IV chelation, it could be oral chelation. With the IV, with the synthetic chelators, they're generally designed specifically for metals. and they have a certain attraction to certain metals. So EDTA is a little bit better for lead, and some of them are better for different things. But then they don't bind to environmental toxicants and the toxins and a lot of other things. So they're very limited. And they also are going to bind to essential minerals in your body, because essential minerals are often very similar in structure to the toxic metals. So, you've got calcium, which is very similar in structure to lead. You've got cadmium, a toxic metal, very similar in structure to zinc. You've got aluminum, toxic metal, very similar in structure to silicone, right? So there's these
Yeah.
kind of similarities, and the chelators generally can't tell the difference. They just bind to everything. So while like chelators can be helpful short term, to remove if you were just exposed to a heavy metal, it can grab those things. If you keep taking it, it's going to bind to the essential nutrients as well and possibly cause nutrient depletion. And even in the short term, it's going to be binding to those. So with synthetic chelators, you don't take them with food. Same with the natural chelators or binders, activated charcoal, clays, a lot of these other things, they're just going in and binding to everything. So like charcoal is used even in, you can probably confirm this, right? It's used in like emergency rooms for
Yeah.
overdoses, right? So because it goes in and it just binds to everything. It's not something that you're supposed to be taking all the time, because it's binding to everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you take it with a meal, or if you take it with, other supplements and things, it's likely going to not only be binding to the toxic elements, but binding to some of the essentials that you don't want it to bind to, because that's going to prevent the absorption of those things. So that's where when you hear about charcoals and clays and all these things, it always says take them far away from supplements and food. With zeolite, it's different because it can be taken with food, because it's not just going in and grabbing, it's working through a swap mechanism. So essentially, zeolite has a cage-like structure, which is another unique aspect of it, opposed to just attaching things to its surface. It traps things inside of a cage, all these little micropores or micro cages on the zeolite particle. And within these cages, there's potassium, sodium, magnesium, and calcium, these electrolytes, and it swaps those for heavier elements. So heavier elements are going to be the more toxic elements, like that's why they're called heavy metals, because they're heavier than the essential minerals. So let's say the magnesium in the zeolite cage encounters lead, it swaps the magnesium for the lead. Now you have lead in the zeolite cage, and the magnesium was released. So, but if it comes across, an essential nutrient, it leaves it alone, like a vitamin, because it's not attracted to it more than it's attracted to the minerals already in its cage. So it's only trying to swap for things it's more attracted to, opposed to just grabbing to everything. So it can be taken with food, and not only does it not deplete nutrients, it generally increases nutrient absorption. So in those animal studies, it's always taken with food with animals, right? Because they mix it with the animal feed. They never just mix it with water and give it to them isolated. They mix it with food, and then when they test the blood, it still shows increased levels of nutrient, vitamin and mineral levels. So it's not that because the zeolite is providing those nutrients, it's because it's removing toxic elements that are potentially interfering with the absorption of the nutrient uptake, or just reducing oxidative stress so the body doesn't have to use up some of its antioxidant resources like vitamins as quickly. So that's one
Right.
of the main things that makes zeolites unique, is that they work through a swap mechanism, opposed to just grabbing everything.
That's pretty cool. Well, my cows, so we had a cow pass away, which was really sad. And we got the vet said that we got some bad hay, that it was just
Mm.
nutrient depleted. And then, it wasn't moldy, but that's probably what, who knows if it was bad hay. But that's one of the things with the animal studies. A lot of the animal studies are done with mold and mycotoxins on animals because the feed is moldy from moldy corn or the grains. So I was really interested to see when I was like looking up what to do for bad hay for cows that, they mentioned give some zeolites, but I was kind of nervous about doing it. So now I'm not. And I'm going to start giving the cows a little bit of zeolites, especially if it's going to help a little bit with nutrient absorption because cows are supposed to be easy to take care of. I have not found that, by the way. I do not think they were easy. Now I'm just like stressed that they're just gonna like anyway, so I'm gonna give some zeolite to them probably today. Oh, I just needed the go ahead. I mean, it's like the Wild West out here on this mini farm. But anyway, it's so interesting because mold and mycotoxins specifically, I mean, It just puts like such a stressful, heavy burden on our liver and just clogs up the liver. And this is like women, I see them with so many hormone problems because of that. And I mentioned the weight gain before. So I do really like zeolites for mold because it is very well tolerated too. So I guess when we talk about zeolites, this is all happening. This is an oral, like a lot of chelation is IV. So this is you take it orally and it just passes through the gut and like to the stool or does it get in the blood? Like how does it work exactly?
Yeah. So yeah, it's oral. So it's a powder, zeocharge powder. So first of all, there's a bunch of types of zeolite. Zeolite is just the name of a mineral. So you've got, a bunch of naturally occurring types of zeolite. You've got a bunch of synthetic forms of zeolite. So most zeolites are going to be toxic. So don't just go buy zeolite, right? So there's like certain zeolites that just, and even the naturally occurring that are toxic based on their structure. So the type that is used for supplements is called clinoptilolite. So that's what you want to look for in a supplement, clinoptilolite. That's what we use in zeocharge. And that's the one that's been studied to be shown to be safe for humans and animals. So it's completely sidetracked there with a bunch of thoughts about different forms of zeolite. But
Yeah.
let me mention the synthetic zeolites really quickly. So there's studies on synthetic zeolites that have been used for a lot of industrial purposes.
Mhm.
And those ones do not have the same properties as the natural. So everything we just talked about with the select binding capacity does not apply to the synthetic zeolites because they're
Are
basically
they
synthetic chelators.
are they labeled? Like how do you know if you're getting a natural versus synthetic zeolite?
They try to hide it, a lot of them. So that's why I don't recommend any sort of nano zeolite, because a lot of the nano
Oh,
zeolites are so like some of them will say on the label lab grown, which
yeah.
means that just means synthetic. That's just a gentler term for synthetic. But those are using synthetic metals to make a zeolite, which is going to be a synthetic chelator. It's not going to have the same selective properties. So be very careful of those. And in the research, there's actually research showing that the synthetic zeolites can actually, the body doesn't really know what to do with them, and they can accumulate in tissue and organs. Whereas natural zeolite's completely safe, that doesn't happen. The body just processes it and moves it out. So in terms of your question of where does it go, with a naturally occurring zeolite powder, like zeocharge, you take it orally, you mix it with water or mix it with food, whatever, you drink it down, eat it, and it goes to the GI tract, and then it's excreted through the stool, right? So it's not absorbed through the intestinal lining into the bloodstream. Although most people think that it is, or most people assume that it is, because it has a systemic full body detox effect. We could talk about that in a minute. It's a downstream detox cascade, not a direct binding in organs. So it just stays in the GI tract. That's where you want it. That's the most effective way to detox anyway, is effectively binding in the gut. When you take some of these synthetic zeolites, those are marketed and potentially actually do enter the bloodstream. It would probably have to be sublingually that it would get to the bloodstream, because otherwise these nanos would have to go through the entire digestive tract without encountering toxicity, and able to be able to absorb through the intestinal lining to get to the bloodstream. And then they'd have to go through the bloodstream without encountering toxicity to get to the brain or an organ. So generally these claims, when these companies are like, oh, this is going to the brain, there's no validation for that for any of these companies. They're just making stuff up. Once again, marketing. It's possible, maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's very unlikely. If they are sublingually absorbed, some of these, the nanos, potentially that's occurring, but you don't really want a zeolite, especially a synthetic or a lab grown zeolite. You do not want it in your brain. You want your brain to naturally release toxic elements through its natural functions, like the lymphatic system, opposed to doing something where you're fighting against the body's natural process, like a synthetic chelator in the brain. Is not really a good idea. So zeocharge stays in the gut. It binds, and most of the active toxicity in your body is in the gut, right? There's so much stuff going on in the gut. And then as you remove that kind of level one toxicity, that, what your body's processing, and this is going to be, by the way, so we haven't even talked about what it binds to. So zeolite binds to heavy metals and binds to the environmental toxicants like the glyphosate, nitrates, various fertilizers and chemicals. It binds to BPA. It binds to mycotoxins. It binds to radioactive materials like cesium and strontium. And it binds to, and this is one of the most important aspects of it, metabolic waste products. You mentioned ammonia. I think, or you mentioned liver dysfunction. So when there's liver dysfunction, there's an excess of ammonia. So it binds to ammonia, which very strongly. And I think that's one of the main benefits of zeolite is actually its ability to bind to these waste products that your body's naturally producing, because those are taking up your body's detox energy. So, and your body can clear these things, but if your body's not working optimally, then the body's having a more difficult time to clear these things. So if you clear them, then the body has more energy to deal with the other external toxins and toxicants that are coming in on a daily basis. And if you have Lyme or, one of these issues with microbial overgrowth, the microbes are producing a lot of ammonia as well in the GI tract. So just the ammonia binding capacity is huge, but just binding stuff in the GI tract, then the body says, okay, we've emptied that cup. Now we can start dumping the metals from the brain, from the other organs, from general tissue into, the bloodstream and into the gut for removal, because now there's room to receive it. If it was at max capacity, the body says, we're going to keep these toxicants stored in tissue because we can't safely remove them. And that's essentially what happens when you get detox reactions, is a
Mm.
lot of these other detox products, they're a detox reaction. While yes, it means something's happening, it's not ideal because it's a signal from your body that is saying there's more toxicity floating around than what I want to be dealing with. That's why I'm telling you, that's why I have a headache. That's why I'm giving you these signals of toxicity. So when you take sometimes synthetic chelators or even homeopathic remedies or some good detox agents, and there's a lot of ways to detox, but when you take these things and you're at max capacity in your GI tract or in your blood, level 1, kind of what the active toxicity I call it, and the stored toxicity I call it deactive toxicity. So when you activate toxicity from tissue, add it to your active toxic load. If you were at max capacity and you weren't symptomatic, now you have symptoms. It's because you put yourself over that threshold. You overflowed the cup. And that's going to be problematic because, one, you're getting symptoms and it could, result in increased mast cell activation, all sorts of issues. And then there's more likelihood of a redistribution of the toxic elements because your body's not going to have enough energy to get rid of everything. You're still going to get rid of more than you would have if you didn't take the product. So it's a net positive, but it could be very harsh and some of those could redistribute and go to new places. So that's where detox symptoms aren't ideal if you can avoid them. The healthier you are, the less likely you are to get detox reactions because you have more room to receive the toxic dump from tissues because there's more room in your cup. So what Zeocharge is doing, which is the opposite of most detox agents, instead of automatically adding stress to the system, which is inherently what detox does, Zeocharge goes in, it binds. It starts removing stuff from that cup. So it's reducing stress. And then the body says, okay, now we have room. And it basically adds its own stress. So it says, now we're going to release. So it's working with the body's natural process and it helps the body detox at its own pace if it wants to and when it wants to. And it'll let go of what it wants to when it wants to as well, opposed to going in and trying to, bind to a very specific metal like a mercury and just hoping for the best.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to back up to something you said about the nano zeolites. So, would you say, is it safe to say that most liquid zeolites are nano zeolites?
No, they would like you to think they are, but they are not. So it goes back to what we were talking about with the marketing. So
Right. Right.
initially,
Yeah. So, most liquid are actually, from kind of what I heard you talking about, most of the liquid drops are probably nano zeolites,
no,
which,
they're not. They're just marketing themselves as nano. This is what they are. So initially you had the powders. That's all there was. And then you
yes.
got the marketing companies involved and they said, all right, this is going to be huge, right? Detox, zeolite, all this. Then they literally took the powder. There's only a couple companies selling, like one company in the US, one company in Europe selling powdered zeolite. They took those powders, they bought them from them, they mixed it with water, and they called it a nano zeolite or liquid
Uh,
zeolite.
okay.
It's literally just the powder. And we're talking about 1 milligram, maximum 2-3 milligrams per serving, opposed to the powders, which are thousands of milligrams. It's just marketing. There's no advantage to them. People
Okay.
were getting detox reactions, which we'll talk about why. But then we had in a second, but those are not good products. And most of the liquids on the market, that's what they are still.
It's
Now,
not enough. It's not enough of the
yeah, it's
zeolite.
just
You're
a microdose.
overpaying. You're
It's a
overpaying.
microdose of a powdered zeolite mixed with water. And they'll say, oh, it's hydrated. They'll make up some marketing term, which means nothing. They mean it's mixed with water. They call it hydrated. Like that doesn't mean anything.
Okay,
Right.
so
So,
then the nano zeolites, how would we know again if it's nano? Because nano zeolite you totally want to avoid because it can accumulate in the tissues.
okay. So nano zeolite, I'll give them credit because that's actually a different process. So initially for, I don't know, 5-10 years, it was literally just basically scams. They're just powders mixed with water. And I mean, there's millions of people taking these things. And
Mhm.
just because it's hard to know, right? I mean, it's very interesting. So then the company, people were kind of catching on to that. So then these companies said, all right, let's actually turn this into a nano like what we've been claiming it has been for the last 10 years. So then they started using a different manufacturing process that actually turns the zeolite into a nanoparticle. So in fairness, some of the nanos now are actually nano, some of them are not. It's kind of hard to know. But the ones that are nano are sometimes even more problematic, because the problem is they've made the particle so small that they've destroyed the zeolite cage, right? The whole point of the zeolite is it's this cage with the minerals that exchanges. And then these companies will market themselves. Some of them actually market themselves as clinoptilolite fragments. So clinoptilolite is the type of zeolite fragments, because they've destroyed the zeolite cage. It's not really zeolite anymore. It's just these little pieces of the remaining pieces of the zeolite after the process. And there can still be benefit, because not only does zeolite use this exchange mechanism, but it can also absorb toxicity like a charcoal or clay to the surface. So yes, it still has some potential, but it's not going to be as effective. And you've broken down the cage. There's no research showing safety of those things. We don't know how the body's processing them. Maybe they are getting into the blood or, organs of areas we don't want them. We don't really know. And then in addition to those issues, it's the dosing. So most of these nano products are less than 1 milligram per serving. So most of them, if you look at them, almost all of them are 300 micrograms. So that just tells you something about, there's usually, one or two manufacturers that make all these products. But it's 300 micrograms. That's less than 1 milligram. If someone takes 6 scoops of Zeocharge, which is kind of the high dose starting for people that are very sensitive, that's exactly 100,000 times the amount of zeolite. 30,000 milligrams is 100,000 times 300 micrograms. So just as a compare, it just shows you that there's issues with the liquids and nanos, even if they're very good quality, because if you can't, remember, it's quality and it's quantity. So even if you have good quality, if you can't get it at the therapeutic dose, there could be issues, and people don't understand the dosing paradox with zeolite. And these companies didn't understand it at first either, or they probably still don't, which is why they made the products, besides having incredible profit margins. But when you microdose a zeolite, it seems like a great idea, because you're like, oh, we're very sensitive individuals. We need to start low, work up. But with zeolite, you actually want to work from high to low. It's a reverse titration. So now that is understood, it kind of completely eliminates the need for any liquid or nano zeolite, in my opinion.
Oh, wow.
Of course. And of course, I'm biased.
Yeah. No, but thanks for going into the weeds, right? Because it's, oh gosh, especially in the supplement world. I mean, this is a problem too, why conventional medicine, they call all supplements snake oil, because a lot of it's just marketing, its profit margins like you were talking about. So just thank you for going into the weeds about that, because, we see all these claims being made about the liquid, and you're going to go into detail about the paradox of dosing. And people are just desperate for help for their kids, for themselves. So it's so hard. So very helpful to break that down. I'm sure people listening, send this to your friends, please. If they're taking a liquid zeolite, knowledge is power. And my rooster, hopefully you didn't hear that, he just agreed.
He
Okay.
said,
Anyway,
amen.
did you hear that? Yeah.
I
He was like,
did.
preach, Jeff. Okay. So let's go into this, because to be honest, I didn't know this. So what is this dosing, the paradoxal dosing?
Yep. So I call it the zeolite dosing paradox. I did discover this. So this was I've got,
Okay.
a lengthy document called the higher dose theory of zeolite. I've kind of renamed it to the zeolite dosing paradox, because it's less of a theory at this point. But a lot of companies are now adopting it. So you see a lot of companies that are now doing this reverse titration based on all my work. So, and this was all because of my background in the therapeutic dosing from the other things. So, but anyway, people can check out in much greater detail on the website, zeolitelabs.com. On the education page, there's a whole page and a bunch of videos about the dosing. But essentially, when you microdose zeolite, it's more stressful on your body than when you take a proper dose. So the theory states 10 milligrams of zeolite is more likely to cause negative detox reactions than 10,000 milligrams, right? So what happens is, when you take a very small amount, zeolite has a lot of interesting properties, and it can be very powerful. So even taking 10 milligrams or even 1 milligram can go in and it stirs things up, right? So there's biofilm disruption that might take place. There's a lot of things that kind of just get loose. And then when you take the low dose, all of the zeolite cages are used up. They're all bound. And now you have this big mess that it made, and the body has to deal with that mess. So often adds stress to the system. And in some people, that's going to cause the detox reactions because their cup is overflowing. Now,
Mm.
when you took the higher dose, it still goes in and makes a mess. It still stirs stuff up, even to a greater extent. But since you took so much more, there's extra zeolite cages available to clean up the mess that it made. Right. So it kind of like opens up a biofilm, but now it's binding to the elements in the biofilm instead of making the body
Yeah,
do the
it kind
work
of
for
makes
you.
sense. It makes me think of, remember in like, I don't know, I feel like in elementary schools when people throw up a lot or the kids can't make it to the bathroom and they put that powder to like soak up the vomit and they put like tons of it on there to
Yeah.
really soak up the, anyway, that came to mind. That's
Yeah.
really gross, but
I
that
haven't
came to
heard that
mind when you were
example.
saying you need more. Okay, so this is why sometimes people are like, "Oh, I know it's working when I put the drops in because my kid starts having, Herx reactions or detox reactions." It's because they should have drank the whole or 5 bottles or something, right? Because 'Cause they're
Yeah.
not even getting close to therapeutic dose.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, yep. So essentially it's a sign that the body is experiencing an increased level of active toxicity. So
Mm,
something was happening. So yes, the product is working, but it's not working as well as it could be working. So like we did a sip challenge where people, mixed a scoop of Zeocharge in a glass of water and just took one sip. And some of those individuals got headaches and symptoms. The next day they did one scoop in a glass of water, drink the entire glass, no symptoms. Right. So when you get
okay.
the symptoms, it doesn't mean it worked better. It just means that it was a less efficient detox and it was more stressful. Because when you detox in an ideal detox situation, you feel absolutely nothing or you feel better. When you feel worse, and sometimes it's unavoidable, sometimes you're going to feel worse. But if you can avoid feeling worse, not only are you detoxing more efficiently, but you're probably going to detox faster because the body's going to be more willing to let go of things quicker because it's less stressed. So back
Mm,
to kind of the cup analogy, let's say you're at 95% full of just from your daily dose of toxicity, right? External sources, food, water, air, internal production, ammonia, metabolic waste products, the mycotoxins, all this stuff. You're at 95%. You're not symptomatic, but you're right on the verge. So maybe, you go and you eat some bad food or you eat some food you shouldn't eat. You're symptomatic. You're just kind of on the verge of being sick all the time, whatever. So in that situation, if you take, let's say you take a little bit of Zeocharge or a liquid Zeolite or some other product at a very low dose. Let's say it brings you from 95% full to 93% full. So it's like, yes, you shouldn't get symptoms, but because you stirred so much stuff up, the body might start dumping toxic elements to bring you over 100, or through the biofilm disruption, maybe that brings you over 100. So now you're symptomatic. So you bound a few things, but then the body increased the toxicity on its own. Now, let's say you brought it from 95 to 20 with the proper dose of zeolite, and then your body releases, 50 units of toxicity. You're still under the threshold, so you don't get the symptoms. So the more zeolite you take, the more you're draining the cup, opposed to other detox products, the more product you take, the more you're overflowing the cup. So that's why it's just a completely opposite approach, where with most things, yes, absolutely start low and slow work up because you're adding stress to the system. With zeolite, by design, it's binding and reducing stress. And then when you have an added stress, it's really a cascade of effects from the initial product.
yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and when we talk about detox, there's also a lot of programs out there that are like this push catch versus catch and release. Can you talk about those different methods of detox and the good and the bad, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say there's a lot of ways to detox. So it's not like Zeocharge is the only way to detox, right?
Right.
And even back to the liquids and nanos, some people have successfully used those and felt better. So,
Mhm.
everyone has their own experiences with things. There's a lot of factors. So if something's working for you, absolutely great. I just want to find the most effective and efficient methods for detox and everything else. So that's where I think, the powdered works a little bit better. But
Yeah.
um, it's, what was the question? I was about to go off on the
Yeah,
liquids and nanos
no,
again.
no, you're super excited. Well,
Oh,
before I
the catch and release push
Yeah,
catch.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, but I like what you said about like stressors with detoxing, and you talked about different stressors. It's not always toxins, it's, emotional too. And this is why when you are doing a detox program, I do have patients on adaptogens, to help
Yeah.
their body stress. I mean, it seems though like zeolite's not as stressful, which I mean, when you talk about these different push catch, which is probably a little bit more stress on the body versus catch and release.
Yep.
So we'll get into that.
Yeah. So push catch. I mean, I don't know if that term was made by Chris Shade from Quicksilver, and he's got some great products. I mean, PhD in mercury detox, like brilliant guy. And he's kind of simplified it to, let's push primarily, stimulate the release of toxic elements from the liver through bile. And then that's going to add stress to the system. So then we're going to catch those toxins with the broad spectrum binder to mitigate the stress, right? So it's a great system. So that works well for a lot of people. But the problem is if you're a sensitive individual that has been, maybe called too sick to detox, or you're just prone to reactions, if you do that, when you push, it might be too much for you. And even when you go to mitigate the stress, it might be too late. You might just have terrible symptoms, right? So in that situation, there's a couple things you could do. One, you could actually reverse that and do catch push. So you could actually catch first, take the binder first, and then take the bioflow agent second, because now there's a little bit more room to receive it. That might work a little better for you. But with the ZeoCharge only approach, it would be the catch and release where you're only catching. So you're not trying to force any detox. You're just catching, reducing the stress load, and then the body will release at its own pace, right? So that's kind of the most natural. But if you're a person who's able to tolerate a little bit more push, I have no problem with the push mechanisms. It's just that if you're not someone that's in that position, then the catch and release, at least for a starting point, works great. And then maybe you can graduate to adding some more of the, detox accelerants and the push agents a little bit later.
Yeah. So with how you're explaining detoxing with zeolites specifically, starting high and then going lower, that your body will naturally kind of release the mercury from the brain or whatnot when your body is able to, because we inherently already can do this. It's just we're overburdened.
Yep. So the body's a detox machine, right? And then when the body wants to detox, it wants to excrete these things, but the body is more focused on its priorities. The body's more focused on short-term survival over long-term thrival, right? So essentially, when you're relatively healthy, the toxicity comes in, the body excretes it, gets it out, no problem. But the sicker you become, or if you have a complex health issue, the slower you detox, because your body wants to keep the toxicity out of your processing center, because when the toxicity is in the processing center, it's causing that immune reaction, which is resulting in inflammation, which is resulting in symptoms. When it's in tissue, it's more hidden and it's causing more long-term issues opposed to short-term issues. But the body's priority is short-term survival, right? Homeostasis. So that's why the body will keep these toxic elements in tissue opposed to trying to get them out. So when you become sicker, the body will slow down lymph flow. It'll slow down. A lot of times you're constipated because it slows down bioproduction. You stop sweating. It slows down detox because the body is trying to keep the toxicity out of your processing center and keep it into tissue to protect you in the short term. So as you become healthier, and that's why the key to an effective detox is getting healthy. And people are like, well, that's not health. But it really is the most helpful thing, because maybe for you, getting healthy is something that doesn't even involve detox. Maybe it is involving emotional health. Maybe it's, removing some sort of toxic stressor from your life. Maybe, whatever it may, infected root canal, whatever it may be, that might be the most effective tool to help you detox. Because if it makes you healthier, your body has more energy. When your body has more energy, it naturally is going to start detoxing faster, because it's only going to let go of these toxic elements from tissue if it knows that it can safely excrete them without letting them go, causing a lot of stress and redistributing them. So as people become healthier, a lot of times they start sweating better. They start, pooping more. They start, their lymph goes up, all these things like with ZeoCharge. And it's not because it's directly working on any of those. I call it a detox accelerant, because just by binding, unclogging the detox machinery, the body says, all right, now I have more energy. We're going to start ramping up natural detox. And that's the key to an effective detox, is getting the body to do the work for you, opposed to relying on, all these other supplements to go in and grab stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense. So when you're starting out, if someone's like, well, what do I do? I've been following this person that uses the drops, and obviously that's not effective, or it keeps a forever customer, right? I mean, what are some of these protocols? And, so say you're starting on 4 scoops of 5 grams a day, like what does it look like? Like how many months are you on this protocol? I know it depends on the person. person, but the average. And then what about daily use? What are the overall recommendations, not medical advice surrounding
Yep.
that?
Yep. So the number one rule is the healthier you are, the less you need, right? So the goal with all supplements, in my opinion, is to get off as much as you can because they're supplementing what you need for this time in your life. As you become healthier each year on the protocols from Dr. Jen and others, then you need less stuff because your body works better. Same with Zeocharge. The more toxicity that you have in your body's processing center, so basically it's your daily dose toxicity. And that's the external sources and the internal production. And let me quickly mention that because most people are so focused on the external sources of toxicity that they forget that most of the toxicity that's they're exposed to on a daily basis is coming from within their own bodies. And that's through, toxin production through metabolic waste, the microbial waste products and byproducts, and also toxin recycling. So if you were exposed to toxic elements 20 years ago and you have accumulated these in your liver, as your body releases bile on a daily basis, that bile carries toxicity from your liver into your small intestine. And the body is designed to recycle bile. So it recycles up to 95% of the bile. And the problem is if that bile contains toxicity, you're now recycling toxicity. So let's say you have mercury in your liver, the mercury every day after you eat a meal or you go in a sauna or you sweat or something that produces bile, exercise, the bile with the mercury goes into your small intestine. You start feeling awful. It kind of poisons your small intestine. It goes to the portal vein, enterohepatic recirculation, back to your liver. So you can be poisoning yourself every single day with your own toxicity, even without being exposed to additional sources. So that's why a lot of people are like, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm in this clean environment. It's not all about what you're doing now. It's about what happened in the past and your body's still dealing with it. So that's why just binding to, that's why one of the reasons the push agents can be very stressful for people because they're releasing more toxic bile and then more of that's being recycled and might make you feel worse. Where Zeocharge is just binding to these things in the small intestine and preventing, I like to call it a bile filter. So it's binding to some of the, toxic bile in the small intestine, preventing the recirculation of it. So that's kind of the daily dose, which I think is really important because a lot of people just get confused on, where the toxicity is coming from and all these things. So whatever your daily dose is kind of going to determine the dose that you need of Zeocharge. Because if you're someone that has a high amount of external exposure and internal production and recycling, then you're going to need more more Zeocharge to bind to the higher level of toxicity, right? It's just a numbers game. If you're someone that is not dealing with that much toxicity, both internally and externally, then you need less. Right. So it's basically 100% dependent on that. The more toxic you are, the more you need. The more symptomatic you are, generally, the more you need. So what we recommend is 1 scoop is a maintenance dose if you choose to maintain on it, or basically a healthy person dose. That's what's on the label. Generally, when you see a dose on the label, that means it's for a healthy person for maintenance. It's not like a therapeutic curative dose generally for any supplement. So if someone is looking to vastly improve their health, they're on a journey to get to where they want to be, starting between 2 and 6 scoops is going to be ideal. And I know that's kind of a wide range, but that depends on kind of your level of toxicity and what you're comfortable with as well. And that's taken all at once in 1 dose. That's what we recommend starting off. So let's say you're someone that has had terrible experiences in the past with detox reactions and you're too sick to detox. That's what you've been classified as. So you're going to want to start with generally between 4 and 6 scoops. Let's say 4 scoops. And you take the 4 scoops all at once, 1 time per day. If all that goes well, do that for a month. And then the next month, go down, take 3 scoops once per day. And if that works, great, go down to 2 scoops and you work your way down. And then at any point, if you start getting symptoms on the lower dose, work your way back up. So it's reverse titration. And we have a 5-month program people can utilize. Some people like it. It's a 5-month program where you start on 6 scoops. You do that for a month. Then you go to 5 scoops for month 2, then 4, then 3, then 2. Then you can either be done or you can maintain on 1 scoop if you are continuing to feel the benefit on it. So that's an option. You can also accelerate that program where you do 6 scoops for a week, 5 scoops for a week, 4 scoops, 3, and then kind of maintain on 2 scoops. But 2 scoops is really a good starting dose for most people because it gives you room to maneuver. Because let's say you take 2 scoops and then you get a mild headache or, some sort of detox reaction. Like, okay, maybe that's not quite enough. The next day, go to 4 scoops and then see if that's better. And a lot of times that's going to be better. And if that's only a little bit better, but not 100%, then go to 6 scoops, right? So you can kind of find your dose that way, but it is better to start higher then start lower, because you don't want to stress your system out right from the get-go, because it's
Mm.
harder to calm things down than if you just didn't stress your system out. So it's better to start with 5 and work down, or start with 6 and work down, opposed to start with 1/5 of a scoop just to try it out. Because that's the worst thing you can do, is to microdose it.
Yeah, that's interesting, especially when microdosing things is so popular, but you definitely need that. So when we look at that, you said usually protocols are a couple months. This isn't something that you just take as needed if you haven't done a full protocol, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it can be used. It can be used as a standalone, especially for the more sensitive individuals that just want to, reduce stress on the system. It can be
Mhm.
used in combination as kind of a foundation to any other protocol. So let's say you're already doing a detox protocol, or a metabolic reset, whatever you're doing. You're doing some sort of hormone balancing program, whatever it may be. Then taking Zeocharge just to maybe mitigate some of the stress from some of those other products that they may be causing detox reactions. It can be taken in that way as well. So it just kind of depends on, it can be used in a number of ways. Like, a lot of people just are doing their own protocols with various doctors, and they're using it as push catch. So instead of using a broad spectrum binder that usually is not tolerated well, because a lot of binders are constipating, and Zeocharge generally is not, which is another reason why a lot of people like it. They'll just do like the push agent, and then they'll use Zeocharge as the catch agent instead of, the charcoal. So that's fine, or you can use it on its own. But yes, detox is a process. If you've been accumulating heavy metals for 20, 30 years, or 2 years or 3 years, or however long it's been, your body will not let you get rid of them that quickly, because it will be too stressful on the way out. So that's why it goes back to, it's a natural release from the body at its own pace. So it's a multi-month process for sure, but it's really a multi-year process. And the idea is, after you kind of get this detox ball rolling, then your body will naturally be able to continue the momentum on its own with very limited supplements, because now it has the energy to naturally keep the detox rolling, which is kind of why we like to start high with 6, because it almost it doesn't guarantee. We've only had one situation ever through our testing where 6 scoops wasn't able to get all 15 of the heavy metals moving from the tissue level. And that was one situation that only mercury was the only one that didn't move. And this woman had some severe issues. So
Mm.
everyone else, and that's why our program starts with 6 scoops, because it's the dose that we found that, yes, it's going to get to the deep level detox. And that's the thing. So when people take low doses, sometimes they feel incredible because they're on a binding dose. They're not really detoxing, they're
No.
binding, they're reducing the stress load, but they're not taking enough where the body says, all right, I'm going to let go of heavy metals from the brain. Right.
Mm.
So like, some people will take 1 scoop of Zeocharge, feel incredible, and then they'll go to 2 scoops or 4 scoops or whatever it may be, and then they feel worse. And they're like, well, I thought you said there was this, dosing paradox. But that's because you got to the next level of detox with the higher dose, where now your body starts dumping stuff. So that's why
Yep.
some people, even on the liquids and nanos, some people feel much better, because it's just binding, but they're not really detoxing. And there can still be benefit to that. It's just that when we recommend the 6 scoops, it's because we're on the detox dose, and then we work down, because as you have the ball rolling, you don't need as much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you can think about it 2 ways, like you said, just like a binding agent. Like, even if you get sick on vacation or something, like using it as a binder, just using it in that way versus actually doing a full detox protocol that
Yeah.
is going to take time. So I think that's really interesting. And when people are more on a maintenance, do they sometimes have you seen good results with them just taking it as needed if they are feeling really good and they've already done a little protocol?
Yeah, I mean, if someone's feeling great and they don't have any reason to be concerned, then they can just kind of have it on hand for, yeah, just situations where maybe they have an increased level of circulating toxicity that day from stressors, or from foods, or from travel, or whatever it may be. Totally fine. Starting off, though, especially for someone that's not in that situation, we don't recommend pulsing on and off, because when you go off, a lot of times it's more stressful than staying on. So once again, the opposite of other detoxes, because once, let's say you take it for a week, and your body starts releasing toxicants from tissue and from organs, and then you're catching it every day with the zeolite, but then you stop taking the zeolite, your body is still in this toxin dump mode. Now your
Yeah.
body has to clean it up on its own, and so for a few days you might feel awful when you come off. So people say, well, I should go on and off, because when it's on, I need to let my body have a break. Well, a lot of times when you go off, like, the break is when you're on. Like, your body is less stressed when you're on it than you're off. Now, that depends. There's so many reactions that can happen when you take anything, especially a zeolite. some people, it might be adding stress to their system, and that might be unavoidable. In those situations, yes, pulse on and off, just like another detox. If you're feeling better and you're getting blood testing done and everything's improving, then you can stay on because it's actually reducing stress in your daily life. So it's just individualized, like with anyone else, like with any other product. It's just, figuring out how you're responding to it. And it's going to be a little bit of a individual approach for everyone.
Mm. Yeah, love it. Well, we're coming up on an hour. I feel like we could just talk detox all day because it's that important. And really appreciate everything and all of your knowledge. And I would recommend people check out your website for all the studies and protocols and everything. What is your website? Where can people find you?
Yep. Zeolitelabs.com or zeocharge.com. They both go to zeolitelabs.com, but that's got the most information. We're updating it as well. But there's a case studies page too, which we didn't talk about, which has a lot of, it was before we started, we did a case studies program just to prove that the product, or just to see if the product actually worked. We addressed any potential safety concerns with nutrient depletion, all that. So we got all that in the case studies page, just showing that it does reduce metals from the tissue level. And then we've got a podcast as well, the Detox Experience, that's linked on the website. And it's just ZeoCharge customers who are sharing their experience. A lot of them talk about, the dosing. Some of these people are taking like 12 scoops, like incredible amounts. So there's just very unique stories of what they were taking, how long, their initial reactions. Did they feel worse first? Did they feel better first? That's in the podcast. And then there's an education tab, which has a lot of videos on the dosing and frequently asked questions and all those things. So zeolitelabs.com is the place to go.
Love it. So a hub for detox. It's great. Now, Jeff, I want to ask you just a few questions to end, a little lightning round here. What is your favorite biohack that actually works?
Besides ZeoCharge,
I know. I was like, yeah,
so
besides ZeoCharge.
okay. So I like EMF mitigation. So for example, I live in the woods, in the forest with no Wi-Fi. I have everything hardwired, and we're actually releasing a number of EMF harmonizing technologies. So I think EMF mitigation and just ways to protect yourself against Wi-Fi, cell phone radiation, all those things are very important.
Yeah, I would agree. What would you do if you weren't doing this, if you didn't own a supplement company?
I would probably be doing something else in this industry. So, I would be focusing on like kind of what I was doing before with my clinic, which was kind of a franchise model of setting up kind of like a Starbucks model, putting these low cost biohacking centers in every quarter so people can go and have access to some of this technology for an affordable rate.
I love it. What is the favorite part of your morning routine?
I get up, I pray, or sometimes I pray when I'm in bed and then read the Bible. And then usually I will, depending on the season, like today it's a little bit cold, so I didn't go outside. I went on a hike the last 2 days through the woods in the snow. But like today, I just kind of sat there in front of my sun lamp. So
Yeah.
kind of, get some sort of natural light to set the circadian rhythm. That's usually what I like to do. And usually when it's nice, I'll go for a walk to kind of stimulate just movement and get the natural light when I wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could eliminate one toxin from the world tomorrow, what would it be?
Glyphosate.
Yeah, we get that one a lot. And boy, we just got slapped in the face recently with that,
Yeah.
but
And
we'll see.
and just quick note, because people might find this interesting. I'm in Iowa, which is probably the glyphosate capital of the world.
It
And
is. Yep. Or
and like,
Nebraska.
yeah. So and I have this whole campaign going. It's beware of corn sweat, because Iowa's one of the most humid states, and Nebraska's humid too. And it's humid because of the humidity released from the corn. And
Gross.
glyphosate is water soluble, so that the glyphosate's going to be suspended, or Roundup's going to be suspended, and then it's toxic air anyway. So like my roommate has a bumper sticker I got him that says "Beware of corn sweat." It's hilarious, but yeah,
Oh, that
glyphosate. Yeah, that's it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I brought something to awareness at the AOA House of Delegates, and the only people that were against it, the states, was Nebraska. They were, like, up at the House of Delegates saying, "We shouldn't, like, be giving nutrition advice about GMOs," and we're like, "It's because, like, it's
Yeah.
Nebraska." So, it was pretty funny. We were laughing about that. What is your favorite scripture or book to lean on in tough seasons?
It depends. So I don't have like a specific favorite scripture. Generally, like last 5 years, maybe 6 years, I've just been reading through the Bible like beginning to end, just kind
Yeah.
of starting and going. And then I always pray for just, to see what I need to see. at that season of life. So I'll see, I'll read the same thing and I'll just notice different things each time. So it's not like I have one that I just kind of hold as an anchor. I'll just like have different scriptures that kind of come as I need, I guess. And it's kind of
Sure.
dynamic in that way.
Yeah, the Lord will put it in front of us. That's great.
Yeah.
And then last question, what is one word to leave our listeners with for the week?
One word, like a
Mhm.
statement or one single word,
A single word.
a single word, perseverance.
That's good. That's awesome. So, well, thank you so much. I feel like we have to do a part two sometime. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I think that this was just so practical for our listeners. So, check out Jeff's company and please share this episode.